Okay, welcome to another episode of Deeply Rooted, the Planning Roots podcast. And I am here joined with two friends to talk about invitation and how it applies to mentoring. So I am Deb Shess, and I'm the Deputy Director of Planting Roots. And it is a joy to be on this podcast with you today. I have two adult daughters. We have been a military family for over 3 decades. Um, that's hard to say. Um, but it has been a really great journey. And so I am here with Rachel and Heidi. And Rachel, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Rachel Beard. I am a military spouse. I've been and former active duty. I retired in 2021. We have two kids. They are technically adults, 18 and 20. One in college and one about to head to college. And I've been a military. You said that you've been a military spouse for over 3 decades. Technically speaking, I have been with and affiliated with the military for my entire life. I don't know any other lifestyle other than the military life. I was a military brat and moved on to being a military person and then military spouse.
You cover the whole gamut. Okay, Heidi,
Well,
how about you?
our youngest is planning to join the army. So I will be a
Oh,
military mom at some point in time too.
wow. Yeah.
I'm Heidi Skilling. I have been married to my husband for almost 20 years, and in the military that whole time. We have 5 kids. They are 16, 14, 12, almost 10, and 6. And I'm similar to Rachel. My dad was in the army, so grew up within the military, and then he retired, and I finished high school in Alaska, and then joined ROTC and met my husband during college. And so we've kind of been together since then. And yeah, that's about all it is. I don't have kids entering the military like Rachel yet.
Yeah, me either. My daughters made it clear that that was not going to be their path, nor were they going to marry military. But you never know how those things are going to turn out.
I said I would never join the military. I would never marry a military man. I would never make my children move the way that I moved.
There you go. Life
Never
doesn't
say
always
never.
turn out the way that we expect. Well, we are doing a series on invitation and what that looks like in our lives, the God's invitation to us for salvation, but also the invitation we extend to each other, both for maybe invitation to come on over and have a cup of coffee, an invitation to live life together, to be in community with other people. And today we want to talk about mentoring and what that can look like and ways that we can invite other people into mentoring relationships, ways that we have been invited into that. So I just would love to hear from you guys what that has looked like in your military journey or life journey. Um, I I tend to think of mentoring. I heard in a podcast once mentoring described as the ideal mentoring relationship is really a friendship, and that mentoring goes both ways. And it's not just a hierarchical, this person is mentoring this person, but it's a relationship where things are shared. It's two way. It's focused on mutual learning, and I loved that definition because I certainly have seen that play out in my life, getting to learn from someone who's a stage behind me as well as people who are ahead of me. But what are some of those mentoring type relationships that you have gotten to experience in your life? Heidi, I'll start with you.
Um, so it's a little difficult. I didn't have a whole lot of that growing up, or and really until I entered the military life with my husband. And so one of the first mentoring relationships I had actually was you, Debbie. You kind of came in when we first got to Colorado it was almost 18 years ago, um, 17 years this year. So
Wow.
17 years. That's been a long time. Um, and so seeing how that plays out um, within a military setting and lifestyle was uh, new and eye opening for me. It's not something that I had experienced previously. And so it was eye-opening in terms of never having done that or had that experience of what it looks like, how to invite people into your home. I remember you inviting the entire squadron into your house to decorate and package cookies. And even just that, welcoming of people into the house and what that can feel like and do for somebody who is trying to find their way and doesn't quite understand um, those types of relationships, never having that before. It was a great experience being able to see just what an open home and an open, smiling face and warm attitude of genuinely caring about people can do for um, everyone else to make them feel loved and welcomed. So that was the first experience that I've had. And since then, oh my goodness, Bible study on base opened up a lot more of those opportunities with a lot of friends that are younger than me and just a little bit behind in stage of life and a little bit older that I'm still in touch with and we still talk to all the time. And those relationships that have carried from the beginning of our military career through the end have really made all the difference in terms of making this military life sustainable um, from a personal standpoint and from professional one. Even it's hard to stand there with your spouse and say I can do this long term if you're not um, able to have those relationships that come alongside you throughout the whole time too.
Mm. Well, one of the things, Heidi, that I've always appreciated about you is I think you've really done a good job of inviting mentors into your life. Um, People who are a little stage or two ahead. I know for me, you've invited me into spending time with your kids. And I mean, I think I really got to know your kids well because of you inviting to adventures, going to the aquarium or going to the zoo. And I know you've done that with other people too. And I think that's such a wise thing to do. You have built um, other aunties and grandma figures for your
Mhm.
kids, but you've also then been spending time with someone who's a little bit ahead of where you are. Um,
Yeah, I
I
think
think
it's
that's you've
important
modeled that
to
well.
acknowledge when you're in those situations of what is it that I need, what is it that my family needs, and
Mhm,
how can I also provide um, that friendship and that listening ear to the person that can also help you and your family through this
mhm.
lifestyle. Trying to be a friend as well to those different people, and it's important to not think that we have it all together or we have everything that we need within our four walls because we all need that community and you need that friendship to be able to lean on throughout these years. And so that's important to recognize and to humble yourself a little bit that I will need other people and my kids and my husband will need, those friendships and those people alongside them as well.
Well, and sometimes our kids will hear something better from someone who isn't mom. And so having those other people in your life is, yeah, can be a really valuable thing. What about you, Rachel?
Well, the big one for me was I always had military mentorship. That was easy. That was, kind of how it was worked. And then when we moved on to Schriever in 2015, and my husband was in command, and I was on crew, um, we had never like really created a community where we lived, and for some reason, that one was just we all clicked. It was amazing. We had a great group of folks. But what was really cool was most of the women that I hung out with were either stay at home, full time stay at home, or they were doing work from home or whatever. And it was my first time really interacting in the spouse world in a way that was more than just, hey, nice to meet you. Um, and so they taught me how to be a military spouse in a way that is meaningful and impactful, and how to support spouses in their journeys. And then we all supported each other. Like it was this big, beautiful pile into this person's house on a snow day, and or I was on shift and my neighbor called me because we were on a tornado watch out on Schriever, and my kids were at home because my husband was still at work, and um she went and she got my kids and she got my dog, and fortunately at the time it was a small beagle, not a giant German shepherd. And they all piled into her house to, wait out the tornado warning, and, really took care of my kids. And so creating those relationships where your children have somebody else to go to as well
Mhm.
is huge. And then even, Heidi kind of, invited me into this as well. And, we became friends and I became part of her family and she became part of our family. And we've done Bible studies as groups together. And, her husband is somebody that my husband can talk to very openly. And, he doesn't find that everywhere. And so it's been a real blessing to have those relationships to come alongside you and live life together. And you're away from family and they become your family, and they can teach you so much more than you can teach them a lot of times, or at least that's kind of how I view it. Watching mm, when I retired, I had to stay in DC for 6 months because it was COVID, and I was, and I like to call it, guest room surfing. I was not couch surfing, I was guest room surfing, between two families. And one is, my best friend from, 20 plus years ago. And the other one was another military spouse that I became close to through this environment. And watching how they navigated, teams and meals, like watching how somebody else does mealtime,
Mhm.
helped me become a better mom to my kids. And well, currently I do not cook very often, but at least I came out with a few recipes that enjoyed to this day. But watching how they navigated their lives was a blessing to me in a way that I don't think they'll ever realize.
I love this because both of you described things that are not what we consider a formal mentoring
Hmm.
relationship. And I have found I have had very few times in my life where I've had that formal mentor where I asked somebody to mentor me and we like spent, specific time talking about different things. It has been so much more of a relational mentoring process. And that's what you both described, people that sometimes are in your life for a long time and sometimes are in it for a season while you're stationed in a certain place. How do you think that the military life has affected your view of mentoring or your experience of mentoring?
Mentorship is actually talked about. I think that on the outside, it's not talked about the same way. And so it is a part of our vernacular, and it is a big part of our world. um in religious cultures and things like that, mentorship is usually described as discipleship and things like that.
Mhm,
But in the military, that word has this whole meaning of essentially somebody who, almost the wingman concept, but the somebody you're doing life with who's helping you through the tough times and things like that, and can guide you through those sorts of things. So it's become kind of it's just part of our world. Military spouses have adopted that idea that came from, I don't, it didn't come from, but was brought into our lives through the military.
mhm.
And we've kind of taken it and I think run with it more and turned it into something that's more meaningful and more personal.
Mm. Yeah, what about you, Heidi?
And I've always heard, um, I started attending church a little bit later in life, but hearing that you need to have a Timothy and Paul relationship,
Mhm,
both ways in your life. Be a mentor to somebody and have somebody that you can help and teach them what you've learned so they hopefully don't make the same mistakes, um, and come alongside them in life, but also find somebody who can do that for you because um, it's not something that you're going to have down, and you still need help even if you have information and things that you can pass along to somebody else. And so continuing to find those relationships, but seeing that it is modeled in the Bible, um, and
Mhm.
having a good way forward on how this should look. And again, I think it points out that it is, relational. It's not a formal, you're going to be my, my mentor, but it is genuinely I care about you and I know you care about me type of relationship. And so it's easy to see it modeled in the Bible. It's easy to see it modeled in a formal sense from the military side. But I think, especially as women, it tends to very much be a relational thing, especially when it's done well, and being able to point that back to the Bible and what you see in there.
Yeah, I love that you brought that out. I think that's so great. It's played out differently in my life at different seasons. It's like a few years ago, I had a spouse who came and said, "You're gonna mentor me." She didn't really give me a choice in the in the matter. She just said, "You're gonna mentor me." We've become very good friends. Thankfully, it turned out that way. But what are ways that you have I mean, we talked, Heidi, about how you've invited people along on field trips and things like that with your kids, but what are other ways that you have had that invitation either by somebody else into their life or you have offered that invitation for somebody to come into yours?
Gosh, I have never been as bold or as like um to just flat out ask somebody. I guess I kind of have just seen where things go and friendship wise and relational wise. I wish I would be more, bold to just ask somebody, hey, I don't know this. Can you, come alongside and be my mentor? Or as the person did for you, you will mentor me because I don't know what I'm doing. Um, and so I think it's more of just that for me, it's been a create the relation first, and then I know that at one point it was prayer. Is this something I need to be intentional with? Because if I'm going to be invested in this person's life and be a part of their kids' lives or their life long term, then I need to be intentional with this relationship. And so there is, even though it's not a spoken formal, I'm going to check in with them once a month or I'm going to check in via text every week. It is more of a intentional relationship than it is just my neighbor next door or somebody I see at the church. And it's a genuine intentionality. It's not a um, you know, put on intentionality or a checklist. It's something that I think God has given me or the people that have been mentors in my life, given them the desire to continue to be intentional with that relationship.
Love that. What about you, Rachel?
So actually, Heidi, you are my perfect example of this. Actually, you and I met. George was a baby at a
Mhm.
spouses club thing that I was brought to by my neighbor at Schriever, who was the one who was introducing me into the spouse world, right? And I met you, and you had this teeny tiny baby and all these little munchkins running around, and then I realized you went to our church. And when we moved to DC, I just reached out to you. I was like, "Hey, where are you going?" And you're like, "Oh, well, Debbie told us about this church. We're going to this church because Debbie told us about it." And then we went, and as per usual, it was the weird sermon, and you met us at the door, Debbie, and you were like, "Okay, just so you
That was
know,
not
it's
normal.
not always normally like this." I'm like, "Oh, well, that's pretty par for the course when you're inviting somebody to a church." And Heidi, you invited me to do, women's studies, and you told me about the women's studies, and we did the women's studies together. And we're texting each other, which one are you going to do? Which one are you going to do?
Mhm.
And I just remember we went to the retreat and like started texting each other pictures of our faces. And so now we send each other back and forth the most ridiculous face pictures. I miss your face,
Oh.
to kind of
Hey, I
keep
haven't gotten
in
any of those.
contact. We will include you next time.
Be
They're
careful what you
like
ask for. They are the most unflattering pictures.
they started as bed pictures, like we're like taking pictures of ourselves from side to side. But you become so intentional about making sure that we keep this relationship, and I love it. And my kids love it, and my kids love the skillets, and that you guys have become part of our lives. And it started with you being intentional, in my opinion, about including me into
Mhm.
things like the Bible studies. And hey, you're going to go to the women's conference. I was like, not really. And then and you're like, no, you're going. I was like, okay, so I'm going. And we went and had an amazing time. And I don't remember a whole lot about that weekend other than our drive and our laughs and things like that. It was a perfectly lovely women's conference, but our relationship is what I took out of that. And on the same token, Debbie, you invited me into planting roots to be a part of this. And it came at a time when I was searching for ways to be more intentional in my faith and how I, you know, go about my life. And so it was those kinds of relationships that have really shown me that intentionality. And from my perspective, I always feel like I have to include people, right? Like I want to include people in the conversation.
Mhm.
And so that's just kind of how I do that invitation, if you will, to a relationship. And sometimes it backfires and sometimes it works, but honestly, even you learn something from the backfire
Yeah.
and how you go forward from there.
Yeah, that's so good. I am constantly amazed at how just a little window of invitation can mean so much to people. I just had an experience where I started teaching a Bible study at church, and I always ask God to show me someone who's feeling invisible. Let no woman leave here feeling invisible, you know? So help me to have your eyes to see who needs a special touch today. And there was a woman who, came right away to my mind when I walked in the room and saw her there. And I went over and just had a short conversation with her. And I got an email that week just saying how much that meant to her, that I saw her. And it's those little things. I mean, that was a 5 minutes out of my day, but to her, it meant something. And I think, especially in our military world, that happens all the time. Whether we're at a conference or going, into the office and we stop and see someone and acknowledge them and just ask them how they're doing or ask them about their family. And those are those little tiny invitations that can turn into the kind of relationship that you guys are talking about. And we never know when God's going to gift us with one of those. But even for the ones that, as you say, backfire, you never know if you may think it's a backfire and that person is still feeling seen, and you're being the hands and feet of Jesus to that person for that moment. So love those examples. One of the things that we have talked about a lot in Planting Roots lately is generational things and how different generations see these things differently. I just got to hear a talk by Corey Weathers, and you may be familiar with her. She put out a book called Military Culture Shift, and she's talking about the differences in generation and their services to the country. But she's a chaplain's wife, and so she has that spiritual component to her work too. Um, and we've talked a lot about, how do different generations receive that invitation? It isn't the same. And in the military, we talk about a generation being 10 years. So that means I'm on the fourth generational round of our military life. You guys you each have a little fewer, but um, what are the things that you're seeing in generational differences as you interact with especially some of our real young folks?
I think, my husband being in squadron command and trying to, create those relationships with the spouses that are within his squadron at the moment, um, y you have to reach out in different ways. Even for my age, it was more, "Hey, we're gonna put out a Facebook invite, and we're going to, get people to see it that way." Whereas now it is not Facebook. They don't they don't even log on to Facebook. And so it's more, how do we continue to use technology to get those invitations to even let them know that there's a um, possibility for a relationship, or to come and sit down and Um, so trying to figure out how that's shifting, how people get their information to even know that those opportunities are there, that's changing, and then it's still currently, um, shifting with every generation. It's no longer Instagram. Even is the generation right behind us is
Yeah.
more using Instagram, and behind them that's even trailing off. So continuing to find ways that you can get that information out there, get the opportunity to even sit down with people. But I think that's the biggest thing is just providing a opportunity, whether it's formal or informal, and then trying to find ways to get the information out there. But just providing the space to create those relationships, whether it's, we sit down on Saturdays once a month and have coffee, or, continue to show up to deployed dinners to be able to create those relationships that can then form into something more. And so just generationally trying to find ways that you can still reach out and create those relationships. I think a lot of times it starts online nowadays and then shifts to more in person when you have those chances.
Yeah. Any thoughts on that, Rachel?
It's interesting because I'm seeing it with my kiddos, right? Like,
Mhm.
excuse me. Uh, their, their humor is dark. Their humor is dark, man. Like they're making fun of things that I'm like, woo, too soon. Um, but the reality is I think we're going to start. I'm hopeful that we're going to start to see a shift to more of their desire to go back to those in-person relationships, right? Like we have this middle generation that is this abhorrence of human interaction. And I think we're going to start to see a shift to where they're going to hopefully start bringing that back, and we attribute a lot of it to COVID. Um, but it has been a slow shift over the years to where I have to create a Facebook page. I have to do an Instagram page. Oh, are you on TikTok? Absolutely not, because I'm old and I know that that is a security violation. Um, are you on Snapchat? No, because I find the whole concept of Snapchat sneaky. But like my kids, I didn't give them social media until they were juniors, end of their junior year in high school, and they only had Instagram. And now my 20-year-old can get whatever she wants and have whatever account she wants. She doesn't. She still only has Instagram because she used Snap as a weed out tool, right? Like if you only want to talk to me via Snap, then I don't need to have a relationship with you. And so I think we're going to start to see a shift into this idea that they're starting to get tired of these kinds of relationships, right? Like this is great for you're in one place and we're in another, but like even my daughter in her classes, her professors are forcing group projects because they are wanting to make these students interact as humans and not on the computer and what have you. And there's been a little bit of a reshift back into personal connection. And so you just when you're trying to do things across generations, you just kind of have to you might have to do it a couple of different ways, right? Like I'm going to put it on here and I'm going to put it on here and then I'm going to do a personal invitation to this person because they're going to feel like unless they're personally invited, they're not welcome. And so you just have to adapt to this idea that there's no one right way to invite people anymore. It's not, here's my calling card, here is my personal invitation, right? Like that may work for somebody, but another person, needs that Instagram notification, that Facebook notification. And so you just gotta be flexible and kind of hit the spectrum now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And each generation has changed the way that they communicate. And
And
like,
I think it's important to make sure that it brought me back when you said I showed up with a baby George at the park. It's easy when you're in different generations to forget what it's like in a different stage of life. And
mm,
so being willing to meet that young spouse with 3 crazy kids running around a park and a baby in her arms with grace and patience while she's answering questions to three other kids playing at the park and somebody's throwing a rock at Billy and, Bill hit me in the head with a swing. So all that, remembering what that chaos is like while also continuing to try to, you know, create those relationships. And that can get harder as you continue to go on in the military life to remember what it was like back then.
Yes.
And so giving so much grace that like you gave me when I showed up, and Debbie giving my kids when they ask questions that I don't have answers to. And so coming alongside and just filling in those gaps and just being grace filled with these relationships. Um, Knowing that God created us all differently with different strengths and different weaknesses. And there's a reason that these relationships become so important because we recognize those weaknesses and those faults, and that God is filling in those gaps with other people and other relationships in our lives.
And
Yeah, that's so
I
good.
think we model it, right? Like you were reminding me, Heidi, with baby George. Like my kids see how I interact with your children and how that is a modeling behavior of how you treat other people. And for instance, Josh and Josh is known as tall guy by your
Right.
youngest. He's tall guy. Where's tall guy? And teaching my son that it's you have to meet these kids where they are, right? Like he does not want to. My 18-year-old does not want to play with a 6-year-old, but knowing that those relationships are being created to where he does play with this 6-year-old because that is just how our family dynamics work, and he will forever be tall guy, and he will ever forever be asked questions like, if you could only save your mom or your dad from a nuclear explosion, which one was it going to be? Yeah, that was a very long conversation. And Josh is having to navigate how to pick a parent
While
pull
mom's
apart
looking
their
at
argument.
him.
Yes. But no, and modeling those behaviors, and we can model those behaviors for our younger spouses too, like that includer, inviter kind of way. And I've told spouses many times over the years at various things, you can't you you you're going to always have somebody that you want to be like, but for
Mhm.
it to be authentic, you need to do it your way. So find out what it is that you want to do that that person does, but you don't have to do it the way that they do. And
Yeah.
I always hold you up as my example, right, Debbie? So it's constantly like I want to be Debbie Chefs when I grow up, but I can't because I'm Rachel Beard, and so I have to do it my way, and I have to figure out how to make that authentic. And what is it that you do that I want to do, that what is the essence of what you are doing, and how can I make that personally to me? And so that's the mentorship relationship that I've had with you over the years, is what is she doing that I want to do that makes me go, I want to be her when I grow up? What is that actual thing, and how can I take that into my own life and model it for my kids so that they can then turn it and turn and turn and turn. And the same for military spouses, is that what things do I do that a military spouse potentially might look at someday and say, hey, I want to do that too. I can't be just like Rachel because my mouth doesn't run away with me like Rachel's does, but how can I do this intentionally?
Yeah. Oh, it's so much good stuff there. And that's the importance of mentoring where you're learning from the people behind you too. It's like I have to keep in touch with spouses who are much further behind me in the journey so I know I can't serve them well if I don't know them well. And so any chance I get to sit down with our young folks, it's like I take it and it's like I want to learn. I want to know what you're thinking or how you're seeing or what you are worried about and use those things to then be able to serve them better. We had a conversation with a group of Planning Roots staff where we had some 20 somethings and we had all the way up to the oldest of our staff, and we were talking about these generational things. And some of the older ones were saying, I just have so much learned wisdom that I want to share with you. And it seems like the younger generation just wants to go to TikTok for everything. What advice on everything comes from TikTok? And some of the younger ones were saying, we want to learn from you, but we want you to listen to us too, not just talk to us, not just tell us how it should be. We want you to listen to us because the world is a different place than it was when you were in our shoes. And I thought that was such good insight for them to share, for all of us to be aware
Mhm.
of is that, yeah, parenting for someone like Heidi with a 6-year-old is very different than it was when my kids were 6 because we didn't have all the technology we have now. And so it presents different challenges. Um, so I wanna learn from you of what those challenges are for you now. And there's some things about parenting that just are timeless, and those are the things that I can share wisdom on. So I love this. I do think that you're right that our military community is more open to this mentoring type of relationship because most of us are living without our families, our extended families. We can't go to the aunties and the grandmas because they're not in our neighborhood. So we go to each other. Um, so my next question is, what do you desire for this stage of your life? Where you are at now when you think of a mentor or an opportunity to mentor. Is there anything different for this stage of your life than maybe you've had in the past?
Um, it was a pleasure to have in class, let's be real. Um, for this stage of my life, like I'm in this weird in between phase, right? Like I have a senior in high school, he's about to go off to college, and I'm about to start parenting adults. And I mean, I'm already starting with Audrey, but like the difference in how to parent an adult, I'm looking for mentors to help me through that, right? Or like when my kids come to me with the real deep questions, like, the question, the faith shaking questions, like a I'm looking for mentors to help me through navigating my kids through these sorts of things and navigating those challenges. And just raising, you know, it's easy when they're little. Like everybody says, "Oh, it gets so much easier as they get older." It doesn't. The things
Yeah.
change, and you find out that your oldest is as I always call her, she's my first pancake, right? Like I made all my mistakes on her,
I love that.
and she'll occasionally tell me, "Oh, mom, you did this, right?" Like, okay, and I literally happened to me yesterday, and I'm in tears because I made a mistake, right? In her eyes, I made a mistake. I still think I did the right thing, but in her eyes, I'd made this mistake, and learning how to navigate that and make sure that they're healthy and happy and safe and stable, and will still know that they can come to mom if they need anything at all. And then from, my other side, the military side, right? My husband is still continuing on with his career, and we're in a stage now where I'm kind of lost and out there and don't know how to navigate being, Mrs. Beard at this phase, right? Like I knew how to do it before because I had a lot of years doing that kind of stuff. And now to be on this phase of life, it's a little bit of a challenge. And so looking for that, and then how through all of that, how I continue to, you know, be strong in my faith and strong and, not let all these other things distract me from that personal aspect of it. And, yes, for years I've focused on making sure my kids have a good faith background. Okay, well, now, yes, I'm going to have to continue to do that, but I, it's kind of that finding myself again
Mm.
situation, like in 6 months, I'm going to be here by
Empty nesting.
myself,
Yeah.
and I'll have the time I didn't think I had before,
Mhm.
and being intentional about that, and continuing to grow in my faith during a new season.
Mhm. Yeah. Heidi, anything to add?
Um, I'm still in that weird phase since I have 5 kids of what I need and what I desire hasn't really changed a whole lot.
Mhm.
Um, I still feel like, gosh, there are so many women out there who could explain faith things to my kids better than I can. And one of them still sticks out. as the fruit tree that you explained to Caitlin so long ago about, our faith continuing to grow and to blossom as we become a believer, a new believer, and continuing on that journey to seeing that fruit um, grow, which now, we know is this big word of sanctification. So, continuing to find people that are willing to invest in my kids, even as they are now 16 and getting older and, starting to think about life after mom and dad, but still having this 6-year old that is still in that same phase as, Caitlin was when she continued to ask those questions. So, um, I'm in that weird phase of a lot has changed, but not a lot has changed for me over the
Yeah.
last
Yeah.
10 years, as far as the parenting side and military side. I think we're still even in that happy, easy phase of I understand this. This isn't really a whole lot of new for us. And I've had this phase modeled well for me between, a lot of different people, Rachel and you, and even, Mary Thompson, and all these different people that were able to come and say, hey, this is how we've done this, and taking those different pieces and being able to apply those to this stage of military life. um, I still feel like I'm in that comfort zone of I understand um, this phase, and I still have all of you that I mentioned to still speak into this phase. And it's not so far removed that you guys forget what it was like either. So that's extremely helpful. So I'm in I would say, a rather comfortable stage of where I understand what is um, helpful and what's needed, and also what I can pass along to spouses behind me.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. I think for me, I'm similar to what you guys say. I think there's always the same things we want. We want someone to kind of understand where we are and um and yeah, we want to have those people speaking into our lives. And so I think that doesn't change no matter where we are in our life, but as the seasons change, I have my girls, one is married and one is about to get married, and so we've been parenting adults for a while now, but now we're going into you know, having both of our girls have husbands and our family is complete that way and adjusting to that. And so those are conversations I'm having with people who are a little bit ahead of me who have already done that for a few years. And yet I think the older we get in this journey, the more important it is to keep those conversations with the people behind us so that we don't lose touch. And I got to have a conversation around a table of all young guardians recently, and it was my favorite thing, and we've gotten to do this a few years in a row, just to ask them about their family and what they're thinking about and what concerns they have, and, it was so good, and one of the young women stayed after because she wanted to talk to me one-on-one and ask her questions, and she's struggling with the same things that we have struggled with, is wanting to start a family and how could she do that with her career, and what's that gonna be like for her marriage, and those are the age-old things that we have all struggled with at different seasons, and so, I just love having those women in my life. I love the two of you. That's why I thought this conversation would be fun with the three of us because we have had those types of relationships. And, looking to the future of who can we reach out to, who can we extend that invitation to, and offer a piece of God's goodness and hope that maybe somebody needs to hear that we're not even tracking. So, anything that you want to mention before we wrap up?
I will say something that you said just a second ago struck me. Look for people to mentor you and to who you can mentor who aren't necessarily your world, right? Like, because you can learn so much from somebody who's doing something differently. So, like I said, with the spouses that I was around, a lot of them stayed at home, and they made that less scary. And the idea that staying at home wasn't like gonna kill me, and I was gonna get bored and I was gonna get whatever. And looking for people who don't have the same life that you have or will have, and give you different perspectives too. Like, we tend to look for people to mentor us who are where we want to be.
Mhm.
Sometimes you want to think about, mentoring somebody who's got a totally different situation going on.
Mhm.
And it's not that you're going to tell them that the way that they're doing it is wrong, because the reality is that you're just learning that there are different people in this world and they have a
Mhm.
different way of going about things, and you can learn something from so many people. And I think that we tend to look for people who look and act like us, when the reality is that you only grow when you're talking to somebody who's got something different. and,
Mhm.
and that's been huge for me, with just finding people that have a different perspective,
Mhm.
and you can learn so much from them, and hopefully help them, understand other people. In
Yeah.
today's divided society, you tend to stay in your stovepipe and looking for those people. My best friend is on the other side of the political spectrum than I am, and we can have these really great deep conversations where we both learn a lot. And I
Mhm.
think that that's important too when you're looking at the idea of inviting people. You want to invite people who have different thoughts and different perspectives and are at different phases of life, and different, phases you want to go to, phases you used to be in, but also phases you will never be in, because you can just learn so very much from that, or that perspective.
That's great. Heidi, anything?
Um, I just want I don't know, gosh, how to say this? It's important to be intentional with the relationships if you want solid mentorship, both directions. Intentionality is key. And not being afraid to be honest and vulnerable with the people that you are mentoring or the people that are mentoring you. I think that's very important because if you can't share the true and honest details of what's going on, then it's hard to actually have that relationship that's required for biblical mentorship.
Mhm.
And so I think that's important, and just being vulnerable to say, "Hey, I need help. My kids need help." Or, "How did you do this? I don't think I'm doing this very well." And being grace-filled to people who come to you and say those things, and not judging, not, being afraid to get messy with them where they're at, and just being there for people because life isn't clean. It's not cookie cutter. It's not perfect. It's messy. It's rolling out, cookies all over your counter and there's flour everywhere in the
Mhm.
kitchen. That's what mentorship looks like, is getting in there, helping somebody in the mess, and meeting them where they're at and continuing to love, with that godly love despite all of the mess, on both sides, no matter what you're dealing with, no matter what they're going through. I think that's um, what true biblical, honest, and relational mentorship can look like.
Yes, that's beautiful. Well, we're going to wrap up there. I think the last thing I want to add is just that there's different seasons for this, right? There's some people, I have a friend who calls them drippers. They're people who just kind of drip into your life for a little short season and then they're gone. And then there's the people that you have these long-term relationships with that you grow and go through life together. And God uses all of those to sometimes just give a little bit of truth or encouragement or somebody who understands at the right time. And sometimes it's the people who you're going to grow with long term, and they all have their purpose. And so, thanks for sharing this time with me and talking about mentoring and invitation. And we're going to wrap it up there. And hope that you come back for the next episode of Deeply Rooted. Thanks so much. Trying.